and welcome to the ICT Pulse podcast. I'm Michelle Marius, your host and the editor and publisher of ICT Pulse, the online platform where we discuss ICT issues from a Caribbean perspective. This episode is our first update of 2019 in our long-standing expert insight on cyber threats and security series, where we have invited network IT security experts based in the Caribbean to share their views and knowledge, their insights on network intrusion and security in the region. Today's guest is no stranger to our Expert Insight series, but this is the first time being interviewed via our podcast format. Sean Slattery is the founder and chief technology officer of Caribbean Solutions Lab, a cybersecurity service provider that helps businesses throughout the Caribbean and North America to defend and protect themselves from cyber threats. Based in the Cayman Islands, Sean has been closely affiliated with global computer security software company McAfee and has spent the last 10 plus years focused primarily on cybersecurity. Sean, welcome to the podcast.
Good morning. Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
Okay, so I guess you sort of know the drill. You've been around
Yes.
with this Insight series for a while. So the first thing that we usually just want is a quick recap of what has been the most prevalent types of incidents in the Caribbean region.
So that's a good one. From our perspective, what we've seen is a fairly consistent threat volume. There's always threats, as you know. Just simply being online is enough to get you targeted these days. But for the most part, it's been pretty consistent, and the types have not really changed that much. Email is still the primary delivery mechanism. Phishing, SEO fraud, news scams. Particularly if you follow the U.S. news, elections, and all that kind of thing. Those are great. And natural disasters, those are great lures for cyber criminals to entice people to click certain links, things like that. We've seen up and down, especially around Christmas and holiday seasons, of package delivery fraud. This is, again, all delivered by email. So, you think you've ordered some stuff with Amazon, going to your Miami forwarder and says, hey, there's an email comes in, there's a problem with your package. Click here for best results. So, the drill. It's pretty common, but that's seasonal, and it's prevalent because it works. At the end of the day, email costs next to nothing, and it's an easy way to get a lot of campaigns going. So, and we're also seeing a low but growing volume of threats targeting mobile devices. It started out with SMS messages. Something came in, you need to check on this, and you just get a little link. And most people don't tend to put a whole lot of security on their mobile devices, and it's just the way it is, for better or for worse. And we're also seeing more mobile threats targeting or leveraging social media. So that's an interesting one where particularly social media is great and it gives us the ability to share information, but those QR codes like on Snapchat and all the rest, the big challenge there is it's a code that takes you to a website or launches an app that you really don't know what it is until you click it. So
right.
We're seeing that grow steadily as well.
Interesting. Yeah, that QR code one is quite disturbing because, as you rightfully say, you don't know what you're clicking until you get there, by which time it might be too late.
Yeah.
I just wanted to get your thoughts. Why do you think we're getting increased volumes of traffic?
I think it's just the target, right? In the sense that we can fall into that stigma of we're the small satellite office of some larger firms and we're less likely to have strict controls. And at the end of the day, why not? It costs. We've seen a lot of campaigns targeting financial institutions, for example, while the main institutions are in the UK and the US, by nature of having financial institutions also in the region that may be affiliate banks or owned or doing certain joint ventures, we're seeing those threats impact the region as well. I compared notes with at a conference a couple years back in Las Vegas with I guess it was a CISO of a bank, and we were comparing notes, and we literally drilled down to the day and to time and day of campaign starting, and I could match within minutes the campaign impacting regional customers or you start to see the traffic attempts, if you will, and it's just because we're online, and at the end of the day, as I said, why not? It costs next to nothing to target an IP address or vast swaths of IP addresses these days. And so it's just easy. It's just there, and there's not much we can do about it. It's just the nature of the beast.
Understood. So is ransomware still as big as it used to be? Or what's going on in that space? Is it still a huge threat?
Yeah, generally, yes. It's easy money, but I think it's people's awareness. When I say people, I talk about customers, end users, and organizations. Their awareness of the threat is growing. So I don't think it's, again, this is qualitatively, it's as effective these days. But when it does come in and does impact an organization, it's just as impactful. We're still dealing with, I still don't recommend paying the ransoms in general. Because there's still no guarantee that you'll get your data back, and you're still going to have to shut down your entire organization, re-image, reinstall all your systems. So, assuming you have backups, and that's I think these days it's rare. I should hope that organizations don't have consistent good backups, but assuming you have backups, really it's just you're going to take down your entire organization and suffer loss of productivity anyway. So what's the point of spending more money on something you hope will help out? And hope's not a strategy. So
understood. So I guess before we continue, let's just change gears for a few moments. Sure. And tell me about a bit more about your background, what you do at Caribbean Solutions Lab, and how you became involved in network security.
It was funny. I was thinking about this the other day, and I was chatting to some people, and they asked what I did, and I realized that I've actually before college, when I started getting into computer science, I realized I'd been working with security mechanisms in some way since 25. I don't know, it's been a while, right? Since those days, I just realized I have to do the math on that one. It's a couple decades worth, but this goes back to, funnily enough, using John McAfee's original antivirus shareware. It was my go-to tool for removing viruses back when we could count them by the dozens. Mm-hmm. But I guess what happened is, moved to the Cayman 20 years ago, and over time, I've always touched in security. Typically back then, it was firewalls and antivirus, not a whole lot beyond that. Maybe an email filter, maybe a web filter. But we used to get into heated discussions with our suppliers over whether or not a security technology would work or wouldn't work, or where it could be used. And they eventually, one of them suggested that. They said, Sean, this technology is good, if not better than us. Why don't you consider being an instructor? And it sort of clicked. And so that's kind of how it started. And I love, working with people and getting out there and talking about these technologies. So it kind of started from there. And so I became a McAfee instructor originally. And, as I started traveling the Caribbean more, working with more and more organizations and countries, it just really appeals to me. And so, shortly after that, I eventually saw the writing on the wall, as it were, and saw that security was the next big thing. It was really where I really enjoyed spending my time. And so shortly after becoming an instructor, I started focusing just on security, and it just grew from there. And, what I love about the industry, too, is it's always changing. There's always, in the sense that there's always something interesting. There's also the mental challenge of there is a bad guy, there is an adversary, you're trying to beat them or prevent something. So it's more than just, installing another piece of software. There is that mental challenge, I guess, as it were, as well, that intellectual challenge of beating that adversary. So
definitely, and certainly just trying to keep abreast of what's going on in this space. Yeah. So at Caribbean Solutions Lab, it's in the Cayman Islands. I think, even we here in the Caribbean, we think of it as just sort of, very small country. And yes, that they might be big on tourism and offshore companies and financial services. But, can you give a sense of the scope of the business?
Sure. So that's a good point. See, it's funny because I started working in the industry fairly early on, and I always joke that it's a small industry, and there's only about 1,000 people. That's an arbitrary number, but the point is it's a small industry, and we all know each other. And a lot of these new technologies, keeping abreast, come about because I know the founders of one company. They built the company, sold it, moved on to a new venture. They contact me and introduce their technology. So that's really neat. And I said also the ability to communicate with peers is huge, and that I can, for example, when we see a threat or indicator of a compromise, I can ring up or email, just about anyone on another continent and go, where else have we seen that? So, that's the nature of the small industry. So as a result, we see business leads and referrals and questions come across from all over the world. And well, we are based in Cayman, and probably 2/3 of our efforts are regional around managed services, where we assist or manage, operate, tune the various technologies we may sell, or sometimes other companies sell for the customers. We handle the day-to-day operations for the customers. But we also do a fair amount of services back up into North America, where, for example, I may have an expertise in one technology, and another partner may not, and we'll work at a deal to address the customer's needs together. And then we're also, of course, being a reseller, we do sell certain security technologies around the region as well. And so we've been fairly selective in that, always trying to be forward thinking and provide technologies that are advanced is probably too simplistic over, but I think you get the idea of more advanced, interesting, capable, that also don't make life miserable, because
yes.
That's the one thing people see about security is, a joke about, and I used this one year in a presentation, I said, if we had perfect TSA security, we'd never get on the airplanes, because these airplanes would be safe because they're never flying. But of course, that's not practical. So
yes.
It's a fine balance between securing and, obstructing and hindering the business or the operations and all that. And that's a constant challenge, but that's what we do really well, is manage that. And I think that's where we've been successful with organizations, is just, they reach a point where, particularly in the Caribbean, where the IT people tend to wear a lot of hats.
Yes.
To say, do you want 3 more hats to wear, or can I help you out and offload that burden for you? And I think that's been a successful message over time.
Excellent. So what do you think is the top cybersecurity concern businesses face today, or security concerns?
I think public perception is a huge one, and that can be, we're aware of certain organizations in the past 6 months that had their entire operations shut down. And when you're in a financial services sector, particularly public facing or retail oriented, that's a big black eye. And so any threat, whether it be a simple, whatever the threat is, whether it be ransomware, or the CEO was tricked into wiring money off, or whatever the case may be, ultimately, public perception, reputation is the real business impact to, as well as loss of productivity, of course, to these organizations. And as in the Caribbean, we start to solicit more and more investment from overseas, we're seeing changes in behavior in these prospective customers or partners of the Caribbean organizations ask about the cyber posture and infrastructure and all the rest. It's a forefront. It's becoming a common question in the U.S., and as a result, that need, that demand or interest is trickling down to the Caribbean as well. Yeah, I think that's social media perception, loss of business, business, reputation, social media perception, social reputation can make or break organizations at times. So all that comes into play and ultimately boils down to trust in that organization.
Okay, Sean, you mentioned social media before, and granted, you sort of tripped on it a while ago. So, but it raised a question I had. How give me a sense as to how social media is affecting the threat landscape.
That's a great question. I can see it from a couple ways. One is with the rise of social media influencers. Take the infamous Fire Festival, which did not happen in the Bahamas. They were able to leverage leverage certain social media influencers with huge followings to generate interest in an event. And obviously, you've heard of things like Kaboo, Cayman, and various other festivals that are making their way around the Caribbean. You've got Carnival, of course, probably being one of the largest and things like that.
Right.
But one of the techniques used for or leveraging social media is that they will specifically leverage or try to take over accounts of influencers to do, whatever it is, whether it be clicking a link to download malware, to generate fake ad money by going to standard web pages that generate revenue based upon ads, things like that. So that's one way, actually taking over, exploiting the social media influencers. But another way is I think something I've observed over the years is, the Caribbean, we're inherently a very trusting people. It's a very small community. Everyone knows everyone, and we're very likely to trust first and ask questions later. And I think that's where that trust can backfire in a way where it's just too easy to say, oh, this is my cousin on another island. Yeah, I'll accept that friend request, and without really thinking about it. And yeah, I think because of that trust, that's also a potential vulnerability. It's just needs to be tempered a bit. That's where we really can go. And I don't want to suggest we stop using social media and anything like that, but it just needs to be used with a bit of caution, I would say.
Understood. Yeah, because I think for many of us, especially on, I guess Facebook, it may happen, but I think for me, I am more aware of it like on LinkedIn because it's a professional network, and I guess people might want to connect with you. You may not know them, but I guess for professional reasons, it might be good to have them on your network or part of your network. But you may not necessarily know exactly who they are. You may not have interacted with them before. And, sometimes some of those requests come to me and I do feel as if they're suspect. You only have 7 followers,
yes.
But why do you want to connect with me? That seems kind of odd. So, yeah, I think whether or not on Facebook or other social media platforms that you sometimes get friend requests or some requests to connect and you think it's harmless.
Right.
But
absolutely agreed. And that's a great one in terms of you talking about Facebook, and it reminded me of one of the things I recommend to people, consumers, the end users, regardless of whether it be a corporate customer or just someone I may know, parent of my children's friends or something like that. But it's important with social media, particularly the likes of Facebook, to regularly review your privacy and security settings, because unfortunately, for better or for worse, I don't particularly care for Facebook's security stance in a lot of ways, but I do use the platform. But it's important to regularly review all your settings because they change the settings and you may be exposing more information than you like to the world. Yes. So I kind of have a calendar reminder for myself, and I go through and check, family as well. I actually create, and here's just one of the things I do is I create I have a dummy Facebook account that has no friends, no nothing else, but I use that to audit, if you will, to review and make sure I can't see too much of my own account, my family's accounts, things like that. So that's a technique I do, and just to be sure that something, there wasn't a change in Facebook rules, or I clicked the wrong link. That happens too, right? So or I enabled the wrong setting. So it's a nice way to just verify that your account is fairly protected, or as best as Facebook in this case allows you.
Yeah, that's an excellent suggestion. All right, so going back to, I guess, this sort of business context, and in prepping for this discussion, one of the concerns expressed by IT professionals I contacted is managing the security risk posed by employees. So do you have any advice about how businesses can better address that risk?
Yeah, that's a great question, perhaps the $1 million question, because at the end of the day, the employees kind of make or break the business, and it's kind of hard not to have an organization or business without employees.
Absolutely.
So, it's one that I think it's a standard answer in a way. It's education and awareness, and it's one that we stress over and over till it seems that the horse is dead, as the expression goes. But it really is, the ultimate key, because at the end of the day, we can't play policeman to the employees. That's not the right culture, if you will, and they can't be seen as just not being allowed to do this without really understanding why. So education, making the employees, helping them to understand the theoretical as well as the practical risks to cybersecurity. In the end, cybersecurity is, I reference it as cybersecurity as opposed to IT security, network security, because really it encompasses all manner of the business. It's an HR issue. It's about training and education. It's about the potential risk. If you have a ransomware attack, then maybe they can't get their payroll. That's gonna mean something to them. They click that link, not thinking about it. If the accounting system goes down, and they're not getting paid for a week, that's a real impact. It's a legal issue, potentially dealing with disclosure to customers of a data breach. It's a marketing, it's a communications issue. Of course, it's board. But I think one of the best things organizations can do is regularly hold not only just general cybersecurity education, but security awareness. we have a couple conferences in Cayman where they invite well-known hackers or privacy experts to come down and do demonstrations and just show how easy it is to sometimes trick people or to, trick a system or, just that sort of hacking exposed concept, just to show people how really easy it is to do something as simple as picking a lock. I think that goes a long way. And, of course, another way to make it fun, too, is to, if you can build in cybersecurity games into your organization. Or typically a lot of customers will use email phishing testing systems.
Okay.
So they'll have, they'll put up these campaigns that'll leverage the latest, hurricane news or something like that. And typically systems can be targeted. So they'll regularly send out these emails that they explicitly have to allow through their email systems because they need it to get to the users. And they kind of see who's clicking these links. Those are good ways. If you see one person's regularly clicking a link, that's a good way for a soft touch approach where you go and just, someone starts just discussing, educating them. You don't want to put up, I'm not a fan of putting up that wall of shame, but we've sometimes users need a little help. I've seen one situation where, we had just about every technology under the sun and caught a threat coming in, and the user clicked the link, opened it up anyway. And when we asked why, her answer was, well, I just kind of wanted to see what I was going to do. But she knew it was bad.
Okay.
So that's just a situation sometimes where, it's good to just have a gentle discussion and just, slowly educate. And there's, it's probably the best thing you can do at the end of the day is that education, security awareness. And people, I think, over time, it takes time, but it does eventually work, I think, in most cases where people start to understand the real risks and impact, both in professional life as well as personal to whatever the threat is, bad things happening. We'll just leave it at that.
Yes, definitely. And I guess as much as there's no tool that is absolute, would you have any recommendations in terms of, antivirus and malware removal software?
Sure. Yeah, I would say that, and I'm going to give some context. Well, I give context initially, which is we're talking about the endpoints as we call it. So typically Windows, Mac computers, whether it be at the office or at home. I would say that prevention. The expression is an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure,
Right.
And that is absolutely true. So removal, best removal software, wipe the system clean, reinstall it. There is no better tool than that, unfortunately. But as far as prevention goes, yes, actually our preferred vendor and partner and technology for that is Cylance, in the particular application called Cylance Protect, Cylance, sometimes called Silence because it's quiet. We, number of years ago, funny story, they're former McAfee people, engineers that I've known for better part of a decade, and they, as happens a lot in the industry, they spun off, they left the previous employment, started a new company with a new idea, and I followed them for a number of years. And after 3 or 4 years of just development, I saw some of their technology and was very impressed by it.
Right.
And then we started testing it, and then when we do this periodically, we'll literally take Cylance and every other major antivirus company, things like that, we'll put them to the test. We'll literally grab everything we've ever seen, we'll grab new viruses, whatever types of malware we can get at it, and we'll literally throw them on the bus and see who comes out on top. And Cylance doesn't always score perfectly, but quite often it does. And consistently, it has performed far better by, if let's just say, if Cylance is operating at the 97% greater prevention rate, the best traditional antivirus we're seeing not exceed 50%. And we see that time and time again. So that's, Cylance Protect is one of the technologies we sell to corporate customers, and there is a home edition as well. And I will not now recommend any computer without some form of Cylance, whether it be personal or professional. And then there's a number of other tools we can do beyond that. But in terms of malware virus prevention remediation, for me, there's no better. And that's also, let me put one caveat to that. We've evaluated a lot of technologies in the same space over time, and we found Cylance to be the best fit for the Caribbean size and attitude and type of operation. There are some other good ones out there, but in terms of simplicity and fit and ability to deliver and manage, that was kind of our final decision point. Does it fit our organization? Does it fit the Caribbean? And that was our decision. And I think they've seen a lot of, Silence as a company has seen a lot of growth in the region as well over the past few years too. And I think it's just a testament to how good their technology is.
Okay. As you mentioned, Silence, and certainly just talking about, antivirus and malware removal software, it just dawned on me that a lot of people, especially those who are Mac users, tend to feel as if they don't need antivirus software and so on. So, I mean, what are your thoughts and should we be disabusing them of that notion?
That's a great one. The old Mac versus PC debate, right?
Mm-hmm.
So from a security perspective, they are, from a technical perspective, they are as at risk as any other system. The advantage, the general reason we see more things targeting Windows machines is because there are more Windows machines in the world.
Mm-hmm.
Most businesses operate on Windows, and that's just the way it is. So obviously, if you are a bad guy, a cyber criminal, and you want to try and start a phishing campaign, well, you're going to tailor it to what you're going to see out there. But that's not to say at all that Macs are not targeted. I think, and now in the case of Silence and most other major endpoint security vendors these days, they do have Mac versions of their products. We run Silence on our Macs as well as our Windows, and we don't differentiate. For me, a computer's a computer. But yeah, they are as at risk, and I think in some ways they're more at risk because people are less likely to have some sort of protection on them and probably be, oh, it's a Mac, we're okay, we're going to click that link anyway. But that nothing could be further from the truth. And we have seen, again, proportionally less threats. But I remember I did a talk for it was a cybersecurity for parents at a school, and this was a couple years back, and this question came up, and I actually had a slide prepared where I was able to show them these are Mac viruses live in Cayman right now. Now I was working with a technology company that was able to trace the sources of these infections, but yes, because of how small Cayman is and how we know how the telecommunications pipes are, I could literally trace them down if I wanted to. Obviously, I didn't disclose it, but I could literally trace them to the neighborhood on the island and say, okay, well, this street has 3 Macs that are currently infected with the virus that came out 2 weeks ago. That was the story at the time. So they're definitely prevalent, but also, keep in mind also that the popularity of the Macs is growing, and over time that just means that the cyber criminals are going to switch their focus as well, or adjust their focus.
Understood, and so true. So one of the things that I have been concerned about for a number of years, and it sort of came through again for me when we were discussing the employee risk, is that I sometimes fear that because cybersecurity, our security has been such a concern, and I fear that we have almost become a bit fatigued by it.
Yes.
Why bother? It's sometimes for so many of us, it's a threat that we can't see. It may be happening on our device, but it may not be affecting whatever we are doing. And we don't necessarily realize how vulnerable we are. And I think there might be even just a little bit of fatigue because everybody has been saying for so long about, security, cybersecurity, cybercrime, and this and that, that I think after a while we just are fatigued. What are your thoughts about that? And I don't know whether or not you have any solutions or recommendations you can make.
Yeah, that is a great one and a tough one to answer too. I do agree. I mean, obviously I agree with myself, but I kind of stress that importance of helping end users and customers and people understand the necessity for it. In some ways, it's like the scandal, the recent issues with the Boeing 737 Maxes. It takes an incident for us to remind people how vulnerable we really are, and no one wants to be patient zero, as we call it, right? No one wants to be that first one that never saw that threat before, and we lose everything. But you're absolutely right that there are times where we just it happens to me too. I see another threat report from, vendor X. A new campaign has come out. And we can, in the right news source, I can literally go and look at a database every day and I can see another 10 breaches reported. And it's in some ways it's disheartening in the sense that we're still seeing it, but the reality is the threat's still there. And as far as making it relevant, like I said, it's just it's a tough one. And I don't necessarily have the answer to that one, to be honest, but it's just about that education, trying to find a way to make it relevant. One thing also is education, but not only, I think what I see working too is educating the kids now, because they're, my kids, for example, I've obviously been trained in a household where cybersecurity is, as important as almost anything else at the end of the day. And just the other day, one of my daughters came to me and said, browsing on their phone, this website's acting weird. Can you take a look at it? And, at first I'm thinking, really? But then, I recognize the fact that, my messaging, my education has made her question these things online where it turns out just a bug in the interface. But, that it's important to just raise that question. Now, if I'm dealing with my mother, that's a complete, she's retired. That's a completely different story. I can't, have that same conversation, and I do my best to keep her safe as well. But, maybe the hope there, or the plan is to, look at our future, look at the next generations, do our best to, help educate them on the importance of it. I think unless, and you raise a good point, which was if, so used to seeing news, but if you never have anything bad happen in your organization, what's the point? It's, we have this conversation sometimes with customers where they think it's like insurance. Well, we pay a lot of money every year for nothing to happen.
Yes.
And I would say, education on that, and, when it comes to organizations and, showing them the things that we did prevent is important too. Demonstrating, and that's a huge one in terms of the corporate, sort of commercial world, of show your tools really doing a good job. And I think that just finding a way to convey that information that shows, yes, we did prevent or we did block these types of communications or attacks or what have you. Mm-hmm. But I can't stress going back to just raising awareness about the reality of cybersecurity.
Yeah. I think that a lot of it has to do, as you rightfully said, in how I think the message is being communicated. What I think often happens is that you go to the, workshop, conference or whatever, and you have some expert cybersecurity expert professional, talk about, how you have to be vigilant and the threat landscape and all of these, fancy things. But there's really no demonstration as to the ease with which you're vulnerable. And, therefore, people have just a better awareness. It just almost is a talk shop, for lack of a better word, within that context. So to the extent that people begin to appreciate more the creativity of
relevance as well.
Yes, and relevance, that because, vigilance over a sustained period can become very, very tiring. So there needs to be a continual, I guess, reinforcement of the message for all intents and purposes.
Absolutely agree. I think when it's done well, it being cybersecurity as a, the organization embraces it. And I think what happens there is, as the organization, looks to acquire a business or start a new business unit or acquire an application, you can tell cybersecurity is run well when even the board of directors or the general manager, whatever the officers of the company are called or referenced as, there is that question in that initial meeting. How does this affect our cybersecurity posture? Can we wrap this into our existing processes? Can cybersecurity make it better? I think one thing organizations tend to forget sometimes is cybersecurity isn't just a cost center or a burden shared with compliance. It can be an enabler. I mentioned earlier where we're seeing customers of regional organizations look for information cybersecurity posture. I think that request, or that having cybersecurity on the forefront of discussions is important. And when it works well, you can have, cybersecurity has a seat at the boardroom table, as it were. We can have that honest conversation and go, look, we can make this better by doing this. We can leverage this technology to make not only this new business venture more productive or more secure, but it helps out the rest of things too. And when I think, and it's kind of spin off to the organization, the people level as well, as if it's done wrong, the users of an organization just see it as a burden. They just see themselves being handcuffed constantly. And I can give an example there where I'm currently working with one financial services organization where they have such strict security measures in place just for so I'm working with an officer in the company to exchange, and this is on a personal level, to exchange information. And there was no way for me to transmit confidential information to this person. Mm-hmm. The result was just email me. I'm like, but that's, email is not secure. There was no secure portal. They didn't allow password protected attachments. It was really frustrating because, this organization had taken security so far, it actually hampered and put their customers, me, at risk.
Right.
Because there was no way. And it was incredibly frustrating to realize that, I have to just accept this risk of loss of my personal information, financial records, things like that, because there was no way to securely transmit this information. And it was disheartening too, in a way, because this is a financial services organization that just took it too far. And for me, in my opinion, in the wrong direction.
Okay.
So that's, I think if you handcuff users, they find ways around it too. There was that buzzword a few years back of shadow IT. Users will find a way, and just, sometimes you're making things worse by forcing them to find a poor way to do things. So, but yeah, that was kind of the two ends of the spectrum there. And I can think of, two different organizations where when it's done well, everything just works, and it like I said, it just works. So if we could all be like them.
So my last question,
yeah,
and it usually is one of my last questions in past Expert Insights discussions, is what might be 3 key things organizations should be doing in 2019 to improve their network security?
Right. So I'll amend your network to security to cybersecurity, of course, and
okay,
just cover all aspects.
Yes.
But I think out of the major, I'll call it a learning exercise from things we've seen happen in the last 6 months or so. There is too much expectation, I think, on organizations to have to do all their cybersecurity themselves. Partnering with a service provider, obviously like CSL, is a way they can, actually improve their posture while reducing the burden, the effort of operating their cybersecurity. But in terms of mistakes made in the past 6 months, the incidents I'm thinking of were all situations that could have been easily prevented had there been better operational management of their infrastructure. Mm-hmm. They had, in both organizations' cases, that I can think of right now that come to mind, they had all the technology they needed in place. They had the tools, the applications. It's just, it wasn't being run properly. Mm-hmm. It was just, again, IT people are burdened with 10 plus hats, not enough hours in the day. We all have personal lives, of course. But these were situations where, they had brand X. They thought it was deployed. It wasn't. Another case, they thought they had 200 computers. I'm making up the numbers here. They had 400. And obviously, if you have unexpected, and that has nothing to do with the cybersecurity technology as a whole. That's just operational things, operational management. And so I think is where I'm going here is, regular, really review and hard look. And sometimes that means calling in an outside opinion on it, or calling multiple outside opinions, because obviously, if you call this, and we have our preference for brands, and I'm not saying that's right or wrong, it's just what we choose to work with, right? So why not bring in a couple different organizations to review, and in that, not to play the compliance game. We all have these compliance things to deal with, but I always say, compliance is a check to see if you're doing your job correctly. The real question is that the right job? I mean, so many times I've seen auditors come in to check compliance for a customer, and what they check is completely superficial. Mm-hmm. If we only play the compliance game, you're leaving yourself wide open to further problems. And while it's easy for an organization to say, well, hands up in the air, sorry, we were compliant, the customers don't care. If I were impacted by this bank by loss of my personal data, they may have been compliant, but that doesn't help me. I'm still the one suffering from a loss of my personal information. So I would say yes, is just constantly review what that means, working with an outside provider, review work. Don't assume you're perfect, because none of us are. Mm-hmm. And then, just, I hate to go back to that constant vigilance thing, but it really is that. And, don't get complacent. Okay. Yeah, I think that covers it.
Okay, excellent.
Sure.
All right, so Sean, thanks so much. That was my last question, and I mean this was an excellent discussion. I always learn so much from you, even when we were just doing the written Q&A, and certainly just having the opportunity to bounce things off of you almost in real time in this discussion is so wonderful, and I'm sure that people get so much out of it. Your recommendations and I think very practical things that people will certainly, I hope, take on board and implement as appropriate.
I hope so too. It's important for all of us.
That's it for today's episode. Thank you so much for listening to the ICT Pulse podcast. You can find links to some of the things we talked about on our website, ict-pulse.com. If you like this episode, please show your support by leaving us a review on iTunes, as it will help others find the show. You can email us at info@ict-pulse.com or drop us a note on our Facebook page, facebook.com/ICTPulse, or via Twitter @ICTPulse. We hope you'll join us again for our next episode. Take care.